Countries all over the world dedicate millions, even billions, to massive projects we know and some that we may never know. These projects are done on such a large scale because of the potential benefit and prestige they would bring to the country if they had resounding success. But when these projects blow up in smoke, they become massive failures, making you wonder why the country spent millions on it anyways. Without further ado, these are some mega projects that became complete disasters. Every 4 years, athletes from different corners of the world gather to earn gold and bring honor to their countries in one of the most prestigious events ever held, the Olympics. But it isn't only the athletes that have a tall order ahead of them. The country hosting the event has to go all out to accommodate the millions of people expected to pour in when the time comes. And this isn't any mean feat. To present an unforgettable experience, the host pours millions into developing stadiums for the event and injecting as much pomp and pageantry into it and try everything they can to outshine the previous host. Just take a look at the Olympics that was held in Athens in 2004. The government undertook massive projects like building new stadiums for different sports, a new airport, a massive man-made canoe and kayak, and a number of other infrastructures. The country even spent $1.2 billion on security alone. When everything was said and done, Athens had coughed up a hefty $11 billion to host the biggest athletic event, more than twice its original budget. So, when the country started facing economic challenges, everyone blamed the government for spending money it didn't have on an event that only lasted a few days. Today, most of the stadiums remain unused, drawing more ire from citizens as they are just there, gathering dust. Costing more than $13 billion to host, the 2016 Rio Olympics came with an unexpected price tag. It's like all the countries that host the Olympics can never stick with the budget. Funding the event left many destitute, as over 600,000 people were displaced from their homes to provide spaces to build stadiums. Now, the Olympic stadiums are left abandoned, and the government is still looking for ways to put the buildings to good use. Attempts to get the money they spent back also proved useless because there was only one person interested in buying the stadiums, and I don't think for a very good price. The Biosphere II is one of the strangest science experiments ever constructed, and some might say that it was way ahead of its time. From 1984 to 1991, a futuristic bubble was built to create and study an artificial self-sustaining ecosystem and see whether it can adequately support human life. It is a closed-off structure with geodesic domes and pyramids covering 3 acres of land. Inside it was a miniature rainforest, a desert, mangrove, coral reef, and some animals. For the radical experiment, 8 people called Biospherians were locked in to see how they could survive inside it. But as soon as the crew members got inside, problems with the Biosphere II started popping out everywhere. Oxygen needed to be pumped into the building from outside, which doesn't exactly make it self-sustaining. Even though they expected some animals not to survive, the death rate was higher than expected, and the animals that did thrive caused some problems. Ants and cockroaches ran wild inside the biosphere, and the crew had to spend extra energy to keep their food crops alive. To make matters worse, the crew members constantly had disputes, and once the experiment was over, it was deemed a failure. After pouring $200 million to build the closed structure, spending $1 million to fuel the place, and $25 million per participant, it is sad that it didn't achieve the results that were expected. The Large Hadron Super Collider is a sheer feat of engineering built to study subatomic particles, the building block of all things. While the $4 billion project, not counting maintenance costs, has not proved some of the major theories that it was expected to answer, the collider has achieved some success. For instance, it found the God particle, or Higgs boson, and with that, changed the world of particle physics. While there was celebration among physicists all over the world, some believe that the particle would have been found in Texas if the American government went through with building its own super collider. In the late 1980s, just outside Waxahachie, Texas, the US set out to build a superconducting super collider, and it was going to be 20 times larger than any collider ever built. The Hadron Collider wasn't going to stand a chance against this monstrosity. But things never really go as planned. The project turned out to be bigger than any scientist ever imagined, and the budget blew up from $4.4 billion to $11 billion, with the possibility of increasing again. On the other hand, the Hadron Collider had cost $4 billion to build. The difference in budget was quite massive. It was hard to secure foreign sources for funding, and in the midst of a national recession, spending huge amounts of money on such projects was considered excessive and wasteful. The cultural differences between the different teams managing the project also led to trust issues. At the end, it was completely abandoned and a painful reminder of what could be. The infamous Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States saw the two countries going head-to-head trying to outdo each other. Space exploration was a project both countries could test their strength against each other and dedicated millions towards it. We know about the successes both countries had, with the Soviet Union having the first robotic soft landing on the moon and the United States having the first man to land on the moon and famously planting its flag there. But what about their failures? And believe me, there were many. When the Salyut 2 launched in 1973, it was the first military space station to fly, and it was a major part of the Soviet space program. But 3 days after it was launched into space, problems appeared, undermining the integrity of the spacecraft. Within 2 weeks, the space station re-entered the Earth's atmosphere in a fiery explosion, taking along with it $500 million. In another attempt to land on the moon, the Soviet space program launched a rocket carrying a lunar robot, but it never really made it to the moon. When the rocket crashed, it cost the government $60 to $70 million, and the robot alone costing $100 million. Well guys, space exploration isn't cheap. The US didn't have successes all the time either. The $11.5 billion NASA Challenger explosion is one of the most devastating space projects ever. A little over a minute after it launched, the shuttle began to break apart until it exploded. But it wasn't only money that was lost, as the lives of the astronauts were also lost in the explosion. The Columbia disaster happened in 2003, well after the Challenger. This space project had cost $16.2 billion to complete, but became a traumatic event. On re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, the shuttle began to disintegrate and exploded. This made more people wonder whether space exploration was worth the lives and resources it consumed. Do you think space exploration is a complete waste of money? Are the Olympics worth the cost? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.